What's going on, guys? This is Dr. Matt Wenning at winningstrength.com, and we have the Padres minor league strength coordinator with us. What's going on, dude?
How you doing, brother?
So you just got done training here at the facility. Tell us what that was like.
No, it's good. It's great. Great training with a group of guys. You know,
Yeah.
a little like-minded, good energy, and you know, it's good time. You know, because I'm typically trained by myself pretty much year round, just because of my work schedule and all that stuff. So it's nice to actually be around a group during a training session again.
Yeah, and I noticed that similar energy when I was out seeing you guys at the Padres. It's a real similar energy to how you guys train the athletes out there.
Yeah.
You guys work all together in groups and crews.
Yep.
Tell us how you develop the groups for each session coming in.
Yeah, so the camp that you were out there was our strength camp, and we broke it down by things that each athlete kind of needed to work on. So we utilized like some of our testing data, so our force plate data, and you know, guys that lacked peak propulsive or actual just power output, they had, you know, a certain template, certain workout program, so we split them off. We had guys who just can't decelerate, who lacked braking capabilities, and then that was another group. Then you have like your young hypertrophy group that needs to just gain muscle, your GPP group, and all that kind of stuff. And then that's how we broke up all our athletes in that camp.
So what you're saying is you basically structure the workouts around each individual or small group's weaknesses.
Yes.
And then plug that in, because that's the fastest way to see improvement, because a lot like other sports, you only have so much time in the off season to get anybody any better, because then baseball sucks it all up.
Yes, absolutely. And that was my big focus. This was my first strength camp I've ran with them. So this is my second year in this role. And my big initiative was like, hey, I don't want to do any baseball stuff. They just did that in 140, 150 games, depending on if they were actually up in the major leagues or not. So I wanted no part of that. And this was our very small window to where we can actually focus on, you know, structural weaknesses and things that these guys aren't good at and can't really concentrate on, quite honestly, during a competitive season.
Yeah. So I think what people don't realize is that, you know, we get questions all the time, you do too, on how do you train specifically for baseball or football or other sports. But what most people fail to realize is that a lot of times when somebody's specifically really good in an area, their general capacities are dissipated, because a lot of them come from schools that didn't lift weights to play baseball, that didn't have the general physical conditioning in a normal weight room facility. And getting to the pros now, after even high school, is the first real taste of a strength conditioning program, in which you think, because these guys are playing pro, they would all have a base, but they don't. So talk on that.
Yeah, so it depends on, it's crazy. It's one of them unique sports where you get athletes from different areas, right? We have the players that come from, you know, the Latin American players that come from the Dominican or Venezuela. And I mean, the resources, it just is what it is, isn't the same over there. And so when they come over here, you know, there's an area that needs to be developed. Absolutely. They haven't had that base, unless they're in our Dominican program now. You have, you know, your high school draftees, right? And it just, you never know what you're going to get. I've had a first round draft pick that was well developed, you know, lifted really well and had some good technique, had a good base that I could work with. And then I've had first rounders that their high school program just wasn't it. And so, you know, you got to be able, I think, as a S&C in baseball, be able to adapt and on the fly and understand people's backgrounds and where they're coming from, so you can meet them where they're at.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize is, like, when you're a pro strength coach, a lot of times it comes back down to basics for that exact reason. So what are some main lifts that you feel is ultra important for baseball? I already know the answer because I saw them, but a lot of people don't. What are some main lifts that you require them to do, and why?
Yeah, so we're big on the basics. We squat all our athletes. We deadlift all our athletes. And we split squat, you know, unilateral movements, of course, rear foot elevate. It depends on pitchers or position players. Like our position players, we do rear foot elevated versus regular split squats, just because you get that extra hip extension and it simulates that kind of running motion. And then the split squat, you know, it simulates that stride phase of a pitcher. So they need to be strong and explosive in those areas. And the squat, quite honestly, I mean, you understand this, like, there's nothing that teaches you the ability to hinge and load and get into your hips and develop that posterior chain better, in my opinion. And a lot of the times, like when I worked in the rehab setting for San Diego, almost everyone that came to me couldn't hinge. That was literally their problem, was they couldn't hinge, they couldn't get in their hips, their posterior chain wasn't strong enough, or they just didn't have a physical fitness level that would allow them to do that. And so those were, I bet you, probably 95% of the things that I had to work on there.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the other thing I think that, and again, it's hard to do because when you're on a podcast, but a lot of things I saw you doing very right was obviously deadlifting, which has been a huge topic in the last week and a half too on my social media. You got a lot of pro athletes' parents that are telling people to stay away from deadlifting, stay away from power cleans, stay away from things that both you and I know these guys at this level need, that axial loading, for multiple reasons. But one, most importantly, bone density and ligament and tendon resiliency to reduce injury. And I think the problem is a lot of times these kids will see these professional athletes possibly doing things that you and I wouldn't agree with, even though we've trained professional people. And it causes this hard education barrier to break because now everybody thinks they know everything watching a 30-second clip on YouTube or Instagram. So how do you fight and combat that when you bring in those athletes from those different areas? Yeah,
that's a good one, because it's easier now, obviously, because like I'm in charge of the entire program. So, it's I can kind of say, hey, this is what we're about. This is what we're going to do. It's a little easier now. When I was an affiliate coach, and you would get, like I said, you get athletes coming up to you that maybe they didn't kind of go through that system early on. And so maybe they got taught how to deadlift wrong, right? And then they loaded the bar too much, or, some this, that, and the other, and they got injured. Well, now mentally they're, predisposed, like, I don't want to do that because I got injured. And then that conversation, it's basically like just creating, meeting them in the middle, create value, and establish the relationship first. Because if you don't establish the relationship, they're not going to listen. That's the problem. Is they've had those bad experiences. So establishing that relationship, once you get that, now they start asking you questions. And then once they start asking you questions, then it's like, okay, now I can work. And I can tell
you've already broke that barrier a lot, because when I went out there, all the players, the strength coaches obviously, because they sat in the classes, but all the players already knew who I was. And so they were asking me a ton of shit, which I thought was really cool, because these guys could have came in with a real attitude and like, who fuck this guy? And they were like, man, you've squatted 1,000 pounds before? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, he's like, can we watch my squat and help me? And I'm like, this is a good organization.
It's really cool. And that's something I'm pretty proud of. And a lot of the players that I've had in my time with the Padres, like, they know I have a powerlifting background, and that's kind of, I love to do that. And, I talk about that stuff, and it's kind of, I ingrained that culture early on. So once I took over, like, a lot of these guys have already had those conversations, and they're like, oh, okay, Matt Wenning, let me look it up. And, because I remember talking about, to some of the guys about you breaking the 500, 525 or whatever it was, squat record for reps. And I was like, hey, look at this. And, and you reference those conversations. And so a lot of our players, and because of kind of, everybody talks about culture, we have a culture of getting under the bar, and encouraging each other and developing, because players have seen players like a Jackson Merrill, who's our starting center fielder in the major leagues last year, should have won NL Rookie of the Year, in my opinion. He came through our system, and he was a guy that just embraced that culture, and he benefited because of it. The kid never, and his first time ever playing center field in his entire life was day one of Major League camp. That's incredible.
Yeah, and playing at like a world-class level.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's the hardest issue that most people realize, and it's hard to listen to top pros, because you got some guys like that want to work really hard and they want to advance themselves, and other guys have played on their genetics their entire career, and then they have this ego system where then when they get in, whatever got them to where they're at, they won't let go of it.
Yeah,
I see that a bunch.
Absolutely.
Again, like we talked about, guys getting hurt deadlifting, or guys saying that something else is worthless. And I think the big thing is having a vast array. If you want to be a good strength coach, I think, like you and I both know, being specialized in one particular area is not necessarily a good idea, because your thought process is narrow. Like, people label me a lot of times as just a powerlifting coach, but don't realize I go and help you guys at the Padres, or I've been at the Panthers, or I go and do work with the Cavs. These are completely different sports that on the surface to the layman person would have no conception of why would they need a power lifter to come in and help them. But like we talked about today on squats, like toe positioning,
Yeah.
using muscles that the average sport player doesn't have. Because the problem is when you get to the pros, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that if you guys both have equal skill, it's the one that has the extra shit that wins.
100% every time.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're both skillful in baseball and one guy's stronger than you, his potential to be better on the field is higher.
And then not only is his potential on the field higher, his ability to stay on the field is higher.
Exactly.
And that, in my opinion,
Money.
is the most, yes, absolutely, because that's the most important thing in our business is because, A, they're staying on the field, they're creating opportunities, let's say if they're in the minor leagues, for them to get to the major leagues. And then if they are in the major leagues, they're creating opportunities for us to have success and ultimately win a championship. And they're let's be honest, it's increased revenue for the organization.
So you've been in baseball for a decade?
This will be my 14th year.
So almost 15 years. Have you seen in this 15 years, because I've been in the field roughly and not in the exact same area for about 20, the guys that tend to have the work ethic off the court or off the field tend to be the ones that make the most revenue over the course of a decade. Because a lot of times what I see in like football, the guys that play with genetics only play league minimum years, 2 years, 3 years, because then they start getting banged up. They get injuries. You see the guys like J.J. Watt, Harrison, Jerry Rice. I could keep going on and on. The guys that actually work out really hard tend to be the guys that play the longest and make the most money. So hit on that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I always say that, let's say we draft a guy, first round high school kid, right? I think for the majority of organizations and staff, like, you can get them to the major leagues relatively easily. They're going to get to the big leagues. They're talented. You drafted them for a reason.
They have the skills.
Yes, but the difference is if they don't understand how to prepare themselves daily, how to recover from the sport every single day, and give themselves again that opportunity to perform every day, they're not going to be up there very long. And then then you run into the guys that are the up and down guys who are in AAA, who are mad and salty, and they want to be in the big leagues. But now the coach that's working with them is you're dealing with a situation because they've been there, right? And they think they understand what it takes. And then you're having to teach them that foundation
again
at that level.
Yeah.
And that is very tough.
Yeah, I could imagine that being a real pain in the ass. Because I think people don't realize, like in baseball, there's so many steps to majors, right? Just because you get drafted first round doesn't mean you're out on the field the first year you're there. I mean, sometimes you may be, but a lot of times, talk to us about the differences in what you see in like 1A, 2A, 3A, and majors.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you really want to get into it, like we have at the base level is our Dominican Academy. And that's, your super young Latin American players. I mean, you will have players as young as 16, 17 years old. And those are the players that we're talking about, building the foundation, the fitness level, the movement efficiency, and that kind of thing. And then as they flow up, you get to the States. You have the Arizona League. Now you have a little more talent. Hopefully they have that base built, right? And now we can start loading and developing some things. And then above that, you have our low A affiliate, right? And there is typically where you'll have, some of the players that have went through that system in Arizona and developed and there's this, that, and the other. And you also have our newer draft picks, right? There's a lot of our college guys, or maybe our high school first rounders who are a little more talented will be there. And so that coach's job is to pretty much teach them what it is to take care of themselves at an affiliate. Because now, instead of, in Arizona, the travel's super easy. You're on a bus for 30 minutes. You go to an affiliate, now you're staying overnight, right? Now you're going on longer trips, and you got to understand, you got to
beds you're not used to.
Yep. And then that changes. So what's cool is that changes as you go up. So you get the high A, now the trips are a little longer, the stadiums are a little nicer. The athlete that you're getting there has went through the system and is more developed. So now you can start doing, specialized things with these guys and work on the little things. Now you get the double A. That's for us, that's where most of our best players are. our AA level you'll get a mix. So you start getting a mixed bag of super, super talented younger players who just kind of flew through our system. You get some of the older players who maybe they've been in the big leagues and they haven't been back in a couple years, and so they're free agent signees, and they come over, so they've had that exposure to a completely other program.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have you have some guys who kind of are up and down from 3A or AAA, which is the level literally right before the big leagues. Is one of the hardest levels in the sport because of some of the things I touched on. Is you have pretty much for us, like, it's a lot of free agents. So it's a lot of the guys we're signing right now, yes, are basically free agent guys. I think coming back this year from our AAA team last year, it's less than 10 players.
Wow.
And so
out of how many?
You can run, I think, 33, 35
so
or so.
You only have 30% of the guys returning from last year in 3A.
Yep. And so the coach that's there, basically that entire staff, you have to be great people. You have to be like people, be able to communicate with people really well.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to connect, because if you can't do that at that level, good luck. Because a lot of the reasons I talked about is they've went through other programs, they've went through other organizations. You can't control all that.
Right.
So you have things that they've learned, or maybe some negative experiences that you're going to have to battle. And then, there's the fact that they're trying to get to the major leagues and take care of their family. And they're older. A lot of them are married and have kids and families.
Yeah. Which creates a good positive in some ways, because then you don't have to worry about them as partying and doing as much of that shit. But on the other end, they got more mileage.
Absolutely.
So now you got injuries you're working around.
Yep.
So you have to modify individual training protocols, because each person's not going to be able to handle the same loading due to age or mileage problems. Yep. I think that's a huge issue that people don't realize what they deal with at different levels. Anything else you want to share with, like, how did you get to be a pro baseball strength coach? Because I think a lot of people maybe 20 years younger than us are just getting out of college, and they're like, man, I'd really like to have a job like what you have. What's the steps to getting there?
I actually got lucky. So basically, when my athletic career was over and I started getting into this and working with athletes, like, I wanted to stay in the athletic setting. So you take your typical route of collegiate internships and just trying to, basically learn about the business
not to cut you off, but do you have specific schools that you would recommend for exercise science right now? See, I've been out of the education system for so long. You know how teachers kind of swap like coaches. Mm-hmm. And back when I was in school, where I went to school at Ball State, had 5 of the founding fathers of the NSCA there. Mm-hmm. We had the inventor of motion analysis there. A lot of key players in the exercise science field were at Ball State. But then once I graduated with my master's, they all split. And what I notice now is you see a lot of stuff from Andrew Fry coming out of Kansas. Mm-hmm. And so I'm inclined to believe that Kansas might be the best graduate program right now. But 10 years ago, when Fry was at Appalachian State, they were putting out a lot of research. So the stuff you're reading, do you have particular colleges you say would be a good fit if this is really something that you're interested in?
Yeah, I think Kansas is solid. There's a small school like John Carroll University, and I know that my former Major League Strength coach is kind of running the show there, and I think he's really knowledgeable, and he's kind of comes from that old school kind of mindset and teaches people how to do things the right way and the little things and that kind of stuff that I think younger coaches, quite honestly, need to be ingrained in them in order to
progress.
Succeed. Yeah.
Do you feel like, did you do a similar thing like what I did? I know I was different, but I did an internship at the Indianapolis Colts when I was 19. Luckily, my mom knew somebody that worked in the accounting department at the Colts. Yeah. And then I got a connection in to just do a small internship. And he's like, you need to go to Ball State and you need to go to the head strength coach and you need to volunteer as much as you can.
Yep.
And I think people really miss that. They think that if they go and get their degree and they just sit in class that, hey, look, I have a degree and everything's good. And I realized really quick before I even started school that the extra shit you're doing outside of class is really what separates you in the field, because by the time I graduated with my graduate degree, I already had 10,000 hours of Division 1A strength conditioning experience
Right.
on top of degrees. And I think a lot of people miss that. They go, well, that degree doesn't mean anything, but it does if you're doing the right things in between. So what's your story on that?
Yeah. So I think that's a lost art. I think I get all the time. I get emails and people reaching out like, hey, they kind of want to get into it, and they don't want to. They literally just graduated and they haven't kind of done like what you're talking about, going through that process. Like I went through 2 years without making any money as an internship, working under strength coaches. Like, I mean, that's unfortunately, like, it's a little better nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Than it was then. But I think that's a lost art where people understand that kind of grind aspect and learning from others.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of organizations, that offer some good internship programs in baseball. There's some that even have like, they call it like an associate program where they can actually go to an affiliate, but they're assisting that affiliate, strength coach. And I think that if you're wanting to get in baseball, like, I think outside of the school and some of those internship opportunities, I think, applying to some of those is where it's at, because now, this is what I've told some of the people I've interviewed this past off season is like, I think that's key is you need to do an internship with an organization to where it's not all on you. You're not running the show, you just assist that strength coach and absorb and see, because if you haven't been in baseball and kind of went through that, the everyday kind of grind that it can be, like, you don't understand it. Right. You just can't. And I think, getting that exposure to where, okay, I can step back, I can observe, I can learn, I can grow, and then by year 2, 3, now, okay, maybe I can take over an affiliate or start progressing that way because now I understand it.
So I guess kind of in a bullet point situation, I'm a sophomore in college. I want to come in and I want to do an internship or get hired as an assistant. And you're going to look at my resume. Yeah. What are some key factors you see in someone's resume that goes, I need to give this guy a call? Because I don't think anybody talks about this, right? Like, what are some key things? I got some key things that I think, but I want to know, because you're in the professional field, I want to see what it lines up to what I say.
Yeah. I think, I look at kind of, where they're going to school at, and their education program. Yeah. I think I like to look at kind of if they have any continuing education or certifications. Like, are they hungry for knowledge? I mean, you have to have the CSCS to be anywhere in baseball, and then get an RSCC and that kind of thing. But I look at like the diversity of it. Are you FRC certified, right? Or have you went through like a PRI certification program? Because some of those things, yes, in a vacuum by itself aren't going to make you successful, but the more tools you have in your toolbox, or at least like that seek out of knowledge, right? You're going to be able to adapt it. Because like I talked about in baseball, you got to be able to adapt to situations and players and different backgrounds. And so the more of those you have, I think the more you're going to be able to attack weaknesses and adapt basically.
Yeah. Because sometimes you could go into a program and a lot more people are injured than are healthy. And now your injury profile and understanding how that works is a huge factor. Yep. Then you have the other side where it's performance factor. Then you have the other side where just you're used to talking and mingling with people, and you have a good presence, like we're talking about, like, and I think you can feel that out. And I've seen it before with interns, but like somebody's attitude in the job is almost, you can see it.
Yes.
And like somebody's coming in because they want a paycheck or because they actually want to fix something.
And you can get that, you can find that out, in my opinion, unless they're just outstanding interviewers, you can find that out in that first initial phone call really quick.
So it's important with the first initial phone call, how you present yourself and how you're answering questions. And I would tell people that are watching that want to be in our position is think about, and maybe with your friends, practice questions on the phone. Because if you're nervous, you're going to say things in certain ways that you may not even know what you're doing.
Absolutely. And I'll give you an example. There's a guy I interviewed 3 or 4 weeks ago where the initial phone call, like you could tell, super nervous, stuttering, all that kind of stuff. As he got comfortable, some of the questions I asked was nails, right? Got him to the Zoom interview, and, it was back to that. And I tried to give him layup questions, literally the same questions that I asked him on the phone, and he just couldn't because he hasn't, had that exposure.
So now imagine he's around us that I consider, average genetics. We work hard.
Yeah.
But now he goes in front of who's the guy that looks like he plays defensive end for the Raiders that plays for Padres. It was there.
Oh yeah. Alex McCoy.
McCoy.
Yeah.
And now what are you going to act like when you're in front of him and he looks like he can just rip your arms off your body?
Exactly.
You're going to freak.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest problem is again, it all gets washed out. If you're in a nice Division I area, you're volunteering time, you're probably around teams that have some people that are going to go past college. So you're already used to that environment a little bit, but in an unpressured state because you're just a volunteer.
Right.
And I think that's a big thing. So we're credentials, interview quality, personality, and then the ability to think on your feet.
Absolutely.
Right? I think if you have those 4 things and you're practicing them, people like you and I recognize that.
Yeah, for sure. I've told my superiors, we were hiring for 2 positions and we just filled 1, but it's like the second one we're trying to fill, I just want good people. Mm-hmm. I want good people who are open-minded and, are willing to learn and grow and adapt.
Yeah. You guys have a great coaching staff because, when I first walked into that teaching area that we were just going over shit at the board, I couldn't get a feel. And then as they started loosening it up and joking, I'm like, these are my dudes.
Yep.
And then that's when the knowledge, like the second, third hour really blossomed out because I made them participate.
Yes.
And then they loosened up once I showed them, hey, I'd fix it this way or that way, or start cracking jokes, to see what their demeanor was. And hell, by the second day, we were all friends.
Absolutely.
Which is a great feeling, but it also is a great testament to you that you're hiring the right people because there was no egos involved.
No.
I didn't care that one of those guys wasn't super strong because he was trying to learn the right shit. So you don't have to be a genetic freak. I tell people it helps because all the little shit that I know, I had to work to learn just like you did.
Yeah.
And I think you start finding that people that are willing to learn have a different approach to themselves. They have a different demeanor.
Absolutely.
And people that think they know everything, you can tell it,
Yeah.
And so, I appreciate you coming on. I know we're hungry. We just got done lifting. But we'll be doing some more shit out at Peoria, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Appreciate you,
awesome.
Brother.